just about the very top.
Yeah, and there they are, sitting there. You see Justin Andrus with his very unique Esper control deck. Pretty exciting that he's made it all the way to the top 4, playing cards like Yahenni's Expertise. The other side of the table, somebody who's already representing the United States, a friend of mine, Kevin Jones. There, you see him wearing that bearded dragon shirt. That's the game store that I play at locally, actually. He and I run into each other very often there.
He's also got the hat. He looks like his head was in the game right from when he got dressed this morning. Got a hat with the U.S. flag on it. It's a sensor getting cycled here from Kevin Jones. This control mirror is definitely a little bit off the beaten path, and I'm excited because it even just feels like a sign that, while there is these very dominant red decks, there's some room to slide in to really, thread your deck through the eye of the needle, so to speak, and make your way to the top tables in this case. It's going to be a Doomfall. Taking a look at it, we see Essence Scatter, Gear Hulk, Whirler Virtuoso, Disallow, and Magma Spray. What a hand.
Yeah, this is a nice hand for Kevin Jones. He obviously wishes that he had a third land here. That's going to be a little bit unfortunate for him. But if he's able to hit land drops, this could turn out pretty well for him. I imagine Justin is just going to take the Disallow if he has a Yahenni's Expertise in hand, and if he does not, then it's pretty much a choice between the Disallow or Whirler Virtuoso.
And it looks like you are right. That Disallow is going to be going to the Exile Zone, so those Torrential Gear Hulks are not going to be able to interact with it later on in the game. They do often like to grab a card, an instant specifically, out of the graveyard. Not going to be the case here. And we do see Kevin Jones, not a whole lot of options. Justin, go ahead and put down his 4th land. Right back to Kevin Jones, and he seems to be struggling a bit. He does draw a copy of Censor. There is the option to cycle it. We're seeing him actually... Oh, and it looks like that actually... might be looking at that, or an Essence Scatter. He's going to have to discard here at the cleanup step, choosing not to cycle that Censor. That's an interesting decision.
Yeah, I think he thinks to himself that it's important enough for him to have an answer to Ferry, that he would rather leave open the mana than look for that third land right now.
And it's a 1-mana Syncopate from Kevin Jones here. Justin Andrus does walk into it. He knew about the Essence Scatter, so he goes for a non-creature permanent, and it just does not quite pay off there. Now it's just a matter of, is it really going to punish him so much if Kevin continues to struggle this you're really stuck in the early game portion?
Yeah, and Kevin is getting very punished for this. In a control matchup, one of the most important things is for one to hit their land drops. That's going to allow you to win counter wars. That's going to allow you to protect your important spells. If Kevin Jones is moving to discard, if he's not hitting his land drops, that's going to kind of spell disaster for him.
Chart, of course, coming in for Justin. What an interesting inclusion in a control deck especially, but one that really doesn't have a whole lot of attacking happening. This is a card that we are really a lot more used to seeing in these Godpharaoh gift strategies.
Yeah, the Godpharaoh Gift decks are able to put creatures in their graveyard, or the Godpharaoh's Gift in their graveyard, so they can refurbish it with that card. Justin Andrus, mostly just using it to, rifle through his deck, find the perfect answer he needs for a specific situation. He has a lot of really powerful cards for very specific board situations. And another nice part about Chart a Course in a deck like his is that if he is going to cast something like Yahenni's Expertise, he wants more inexpensive spells that actually can be cast on his main phase.
Great point. So we're going to go ahead and cycle this Fetid Pool's 3 mana for Kevin Jones. He does get down 1 more land. It's starting to come together. Justin Andrus, 3 lands right now. It's going to be another copy of Doomfall to take a look at this hand, and Kevin Jones has not got a lot to say about it. A Search for Azcanta in hand that we saw him not play. A Whirler Virtuoso that we saw him not play. Magma Spray, Essence Scatter. How are you feeling about this?
I still feel like Kevin's in a really rough spot. He's going to need to runner a bunch of lands in a row. What's good for Kevin right now is that Justin's hand is almost entirely reactive. Kevin made a really wise decision in not cycling that Censor to look for the third land on the specific turn where Justin went for that Teferi, and as a result, Kevin was able to counter that Teferi and prevent Justin from really having a way to proactively affect the game.
It's back to Justin Andrus, who does cycle another land, draws a land, and just like you said, not a whole lot of options as far as punishing Jones for his really slow start. He's got a lot of options to react as Kevin Jones starts to work his way into this game, but he doesn't have an enormous suite of tools to really put the pressure on Kevin Jones, to really make him feel like he's that several turns behind.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important thing. When your opponent is missing land drops, you need to be able to punish them in some way or another. And right now, the way that Kevin's getting punished is he's moving to discard step. I mean, he is just losing cards. Justin is getting essentially free removal spells just by passing the turn. And if things continue this way, I mean, it's already going to be incredibly difficult for Kevin to win the game. But, I mean, it's just going to get harder and harder. The thing that Kevin has going for him, though, is that Kevin has more counter magic. And by more, I mean a lot more. And if Kevin can simply leave open a few lands and make sure that any sort of threat card, any sort of card like Teferi from Justin is countered, then Kevin has all the time in the world. And it doesn't matter if he's discarding these cards. It doesn't matter if he's losing all this card advantage, because the only thing that matters at all is keeping those threats, if you will, off of Justin's side of the table.
We see Supreme Will get fired off from Justin Anderson's side. It's a modal spell, so it actually has got a couple of options. One of them that we've been seeing quite a bit is that counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. The other one, take a look at the top 4, put one of those cards in your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And I believe it grabbed this Search for Azcanta that we are now seeing hit the battlefield.
Yeah, and this is interesting because Search for Azcanta is, even though it is just this enchantment that's going to flip into a land, this is the win condition, the proactive card that I talked about. This is a card that Kevin is probably going to have to counter, and that leaves him open to maybe getting Teferied, but he got lucky there, able to dodge it.
Disallow takes down that Search for Azcanta. No fight from Justin Anderson, no follow-up play either. It's the 4th lane coming down for Kevin. For as limited as his options have been on a turn-by-turn basis, he's been really holding his own against this. We're going to fire down a Glimmer of Genius, and Justin still unable to punish him. He may be at 8 mana to Kevin's 4, but from just a casting perspective of who's been able to really put more spells into their graveyard by actually casting them, they're still about pound for pound.
Yeah, about. I think Kevin now, I do like his chances a lot more. And I think that, his matchup is so good here. The fact that he has this counter magic, he's probably going to be able to overcome this. And I'm really surprised here. I'm really impressed even that Kevin has situated himself in such a way that we might see Kevin Jones overcome this tremendous deficit. He missed his 3rd land drop for, I think, 4 turns in a control mirror. And now it looks like he has a shot to win this game, which is just absurd to me.
Yeah, I mean, a 5 mana deficit at one point in this game, and he suddenly looks like he's back in it. Sure, Justin has got an incredible mana advantage, but we've now got a Thopter on the battlefield for Kevin Jones. We saw Cast Down pointed at that Whirler Virtuoso, destroy target non-legendary creature. And as much as we may tell legends of the Whirler Virtuoso, it's not actually going to have that text box printed on it. And there's the Teferi you talked about, kind of that opening. Kevin Jones did tap 3 mana, does not have an answer to this Teferi. This is going to be a big moment for Justin Andrus to really swing that mana advantage around on the battlefield.
Yeah, now that Justin Andrus has this Teferi, but the turn before I thought that Kevin Jones seemed to have a shot to get back into this game, but that Teferi on the battlefield is a disaster for him. And Justin now, with this many lands untapped, going to be drawing multiple cards a turn. It seems like it's only a matter of time before the card advantage will just completely overwhelm Kevin here.
Yeah, we see this Teferi ticking up. It is going to require some kind of play from Justin Andrus, and it's going to actually be a Torrential Gearhulk here. Kevin does have his 6 mana finally assembled, but a simple Essence Scatter from Justin Andrus and a pretty happy exchange, 2 mana for that massive 6 mana spell.
Yeah, the Essence Scatter there, a very good card. So what happened there, by the way, why Justin Andrus's lands are still all untapped, is the Essence Scatter countered the Torrential Gearhulk, and then the end of the draw a card ability on Teferi resolved, so Justin was able to untap the lands that he had tapped for that Essence Scatter.
Oh, but look at this. It's going to be a Teferi from Kevin Jones' side of the battlefield, and using that Berry effect, the minus of Teferi, putting that one 3 cards down in the library, delaying the inevitable. We're going to see a Vraska's Contempt pointed at it, but really the Thopter's, I guess, the only card left on the battlefield after this exchange. It's a bit of a time delay. That Search for Azcanta is going to help Justin actually find it a little bit sooner. That Teferi will be back, but maybe Kevin will be able to assemble some kind of way to interact with it.
Yeah, now Kevin's getting attacked from multiple angles because he knows he's going to have to counter a Teferi on the following turn, and he also knows that there's a search for Azcanta about to flip. This puts him in a really rough spot.
It is difficult. Justin Andrus is down to 2 cards in hand. We saw him really firing through quite a few of them for a little bit. We're going to put that one into the graveyard, transforming this Azcanta, and Kevin is sitting on a Syncopate, which, interestingly enough, despite the enormous amount of mana that Justin has available to him, we're going to see him fire off this Azcanta, the Sunken Rune, to see if he can find something, and it's going to be Doomfall. He does have the ability to Doomfall to clear the way, and then still have the mana left over for Teferi.
Yeah, and I like this play a lot from Justin. Justin wants to make sure that his Teferi is going to resolve, because if he can get that to stick, then it's going to put him in a real situation where he's able to win the game. Whereas if a Teferi doesn't stick, it's really hard to beat somebody like Kevin in a matchup like this.
And Kevin is going to fire down that Syncopate, paying enough to make sure that that is not going to get resolved. We've got 6 open mana on Justin Andrus' side, and Kevin just saying, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to pay, by the look of it, 7 mana, or actually... Okay, yeah, he is going to go for the 7. I wonder if he was considering leaving the option where if Justin Andrus really wants to pay the 6 mana, be able to go for it, because then he would not be able to follow up with the Teferi.
Yeah, that could be a consideration. Now he's tapped out.
Yep.
But
so the Teferi is going to come down to the battlefield. He was able to hold up that Syncopate, but the Doomfall off of that Azcanta. Nice sequencing from Justin Andrus, making sure that he went for that land to lead the way, then following it up with the Doomfall that came from it, then the Teferi, making sure that this is going to really solidify its place on this battlefield.
Absolutely, Justin. He played that turn very well. He's getting rewarded for it. Now he's got a Teferi. And the pressure's on Kevin. I think Kevin's hand has a pair of Magma Sprays.
Looks like we're going to go ahead and just move on to Game 2. Kevin Jones was not feeling that game. It was not moving in his direction. That Teferi was just too much advantage to overcome after too much of a disadvantage going into this game. Missing his 3rd land drop, making it finally... When Justin Andrus was at, I think, 7 mana plus, there was a massive mana deficit. We saw a small glimmer of getting back into this matchup for about a turn, maybe a turn and a half, and then Justin Andrus was just able to put the nail in the coffin on that game.
Yeah, and as we saw in the first game, the cards that really matter here for Justin are Search for Azcanta and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. So if Justin can resolve either of those cards, that's going to give him a real shot to win this match. Otherwise, he's going to need to get lucky. He's going to need Kevin to have mana problems. Kevin, on the other hand, he's got a lot of counter magic, and for Kevin, we're going to want to see Teferi also on the battlefield. These other cards produce incremental value, like incidental value rather. So Torrential Gearhulk, even if there's an answer for it, Kevin's still going to counter something or draw some cards. Whirler Virtuoso, even if there's an answer, it's going to leave behind a Thopter or 2, which can start pressuring the opponent. So
we're taking a look at the deck list here for Kevin Jones. Into the sideboard here, he's got a couple of options as to how to go about combating this Esper control deck. Is there anything that's really standing out to you as the more obvious inclusions, or maybe just the more desirable cards that you would want to bring into the 60 as you head into Game 2?
So Jace's Defeat and Negate, I think, are the obvious inclusions. Other things that Kevin could perhaps experiment with are Walking Ballista. I think that's a card that he may not want to bring in, but I've seen Kevin sideboard that card in Control Mirrors before in various formats, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of his plan. I've not played much with this Jeskai control deck. I don't think many people have. The Jace's Defeats and Negates are slam dunks here. They're great cards. Post-board, now Kevin is going to have Disallows, Syncopates, Censors, Jace's Defeat, and Negate. So once those wars start, Kevin's going to be really good at fighting them. And if we want to pick a fight, if we want to pick fights on end steps, Kevin's the one who's got the pile of Torrential Gearhulks. Kevin's the one who's got the Glimmer of Geniuses. It seems like almost on every angle, Kevin's deck is better suited for a control mirror.
And of course, let's take a look at this Esper control deck. Heading into the sideboard here, it does have a couple of options. I see 3 copies of Negate. Anything else really standing out to you in this sideboard?
So one thing that's really interesting here is this this kind of dance that these players are going to play with Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Kevin can't really take out all of his Magma Sprays or all of his Harness Lightnings because if he does so, he's going to find himself in a situation where Glintsleeve Siphoner can just take the game over. So Kevin has to find the right number of Magma Sprays and or Harness Lightnings to leave in his deck. He needs to be able to kill a turn 2 Glintsleeve Siphoner. When he's on the play, it's going to be a little better for him because he'll also be able to interact with cards like Censor and Syncopate. But in Game 3 on the draw, Kevin's going to have to seriously consider what removal cards are going to stay in his deck to combat a card like Glintsleeve Siphoner.
And it's always so interesting to me when you have, especially it seems to be the case in these very interactive decks, what considerations that they need to have when they're on the play versus on the draw. Even a card like Censor having really big implications on how it can impact a board.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot to be said for the play draw of these control matchups, especially post sideboard when cards like Glintsleeve Siphoner and Argos Bloodfast are at play. Argos Bloodfast, another card that Justin can play that will essentially act as a bit of a win condition in terms of the amount of card advantage that it can produce. It adds to Search for Azcanta and Teferi as cards that Kevin really wants to be countering, and the fact that it only costs 2 mana means that Justin's going to be really happy to include it in his deck.
Yeah, a lot of the smaller cards that, like you said, act as functional win conditions, especially enchantments, which can be a bit difficult for Kevin Jones to really get a hold of. He's got a couple of options as far as really being able to interact with those more unusual permanents, but not a huge amount once they're on the battlefield.
Yeah, I think Kevin's best answer to cards like that once they resolve is Teferi. And, yeah, Teferi's great.
Teferi's the name of the game. Teferi and Search for Azcanta. All right, so these players are going to be heading into it. Kevin Jones, like you said, going to be on the play. He's got to go runner, Game 2 and Game 3 to end up a representative of the U.S. Justin Andrus just 1 game away from achieving what so many people stepped into this hall to do yesterday.
Yeah, he could qualify for the national team. He represented the United States at the World Magic Cup.
What an accomplishment. It's so interesting just how few people have had the opportunity to hold that accomplishment. We see so many incredible players here, and we're running through, this idea of what accomplishments have they had. You see GP top 8s, you see Pro Tour top 8s for, several of these players. You see their performance in a lot of these. You don't see a whole lot of these players being representatives of the U.S., of national champions. Now, Kevin Jones has been on that team before, but he's one of kind of a select few in this room.
Yeah, I think that there are very few players there are only 3 a year who get to be on a particular national team. And, there's the new national format now. This used to be a format that people qualified for via Pro Points and or regionals. And now it's a format where, it's a tournament where people qualify via Planeswalker points. And, the 2 spots joining, the national champion and the runner-up, they're joining the pro player point leader from the United States. So there are the ways in which people have become U.S. national champions have changed over the years. But if you go back and you look at who the U.S. national champions have been, it's a pretty impressive list of names.
We're going to see an evolving wilds come for Justice Andrus. It's going to get him an island, really making sure that his mana stays solidified. And on Kevin Jones' side, an Ether Hub joins the battlefield. He's going to get 1 energy off of that energy mechanic kind of floating off to the side. You're going to see that die on that marker just down below. That's going to be really going into resources like the Harnessed Lightning, like the Whirler Virtuoso, as well as just enabling this Ether Hub to tap for any color of mana.
Yeah, now Kevin's, he's hit his land drops thus far. That's what he wants to be doing.
It's a step in the right direction. Champion of Wits.
We hope that he is able to continue hitting them so he can counter spells if he wants to win this match.
Yeah, the Champion of Wits does hit the battlefield. We saw 2 mana available for Kevin Jones, so whether by his own decision or not, we do now have pressure on the battlefield from Justin Andrus. It's this 2/1 that allows him to also filter a little bit as far as, really increasing the quality of his hand by adding 2 new into it. He needs to discard 2, but it's going to be the worst 2 cards.
Yeah, and Kevin may have just allowed that to resolve depending on how much counter magic he had in hand. He may have also kept some amount of Magma Sprays in his deck to deal with that later on once he draws into them. Kevin is no stranger to using his life total as a resource, and this is the type of matchup where you kind of ignore the way your opponent's attacking you for a decent portion of the game.
And we are going to see a glimmer of genius from Kevin Jones, but Justin Andrus going to battle over it with a supreme will after a swing for 2. This does mean that Justin Andrus is tapped out for this turn. Is there the opportunity for Kevin Jones to make some sort of play that can punish it? It's Whirler Virtuoso, bringing him up to 4 energy. That is going to be 3 energy that comes into play, or, added to Kevin's pool when this enters play.
Yeah, and this is a nice play for Kevin. It allows him to leave open Negate, Censor, and or Syncopate mana if he needs to. Kevin really hoping that he had drawn a Teferi off the top of his library on that turn, but it wasn't meant to be.
Essence Scatter takes down the Scarab God, and like you said, this Whirler Virtuoso also lines up very well against this Champion of Wits. It's a 2-3 against the 2-1, and the Scarab God makes its way to the graveyard. Bit of a difficult position here for Justin Andrus, who I imagine was really hoping for a lot out of that turn.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate how wise Kevin is being, how patient he's being with his counter magic. I think he had the option to Essence Scatter that Champion of Wits and instead chose to hold on to it, knowing that he needed an expensive counter to interact with a card like the Scarab God.
And we're actually seeing a main phase Glimmer of Genius with Justin Andrus tapped down. Tell me a little bit, when you get these control matchups, we suddenly start seeing this shift of the players casting these main phase powerful spells.
Yeah, so when your opponent is tapped out on their turn, that means you have an opening to resolve a spell of your own. And spells that are big enough, spells that you need to resolve, that are important for your game plan, those are the kind of cards where it's worth it to main phase them.
A Teferi tries to come down on Justin Andrus' side, and Kevin Jones has the negate to answer it. That means that Kevin Jones is now going to get to untap with these Thopters, with this Whirler Virtuoso, and we are now once again in that position. These main phase inclusions, Kevin comes out ahead in this one. He's entering into his turn, and Justin Andrus tapped out.
Yeah, so again, if Kevin is able to find a card like Teferi, I imagine he's just going to slam it here and pull way far ahead.
That's not going to be the case. Kevin Jones going to leave his mana open heading into Justin Andrus' turn. Stopping a little bit of that exchange, we're going to go right back to sort of the draw go, but because of the board state, Justin, it's really the initiative is on him to make a play.
Absolutely. I think Justin's under more pressure. Kevin Jones has shifted game plans a little bit. He can pressure his opponent with cards like Whirler Virtuoso. This isn't just some sort of hard blue-white control deck like we're used to seeing.
Glintsleeve Siphoner on the stack, and a Torrential Gearhulk is going to come down to the battlefield. What a massive 5/6 creature. It gets to cast an instant out of the graveyard from Kevin Jones. We actually see him just going for the Glimmer of Genius instead. So actually, I believe that this Glintsleeve Siphoner is actually on the battlefield. We can see the die there for the energy. So this is instead just Kevin Jones trying to fix those draws. That Glintsleeve Siphoner, not a concern of his just yet.
Yeah, and again, Glintsleeve Siphoner, a card that Kevin doesn't really need to worry about. Justin doesn't have a second energy yet. If Justin does decide to attack with that Glintsleeve Siphoner, Kevin has plenty of bodies that he'd be happy to throw in front of it. Kevin can still attack freely with a card like Torrential Gearhulk, and he's got plenty of hard counter magic in hand. I think Kevin is content to simply sit here and continue to attack with Whirler Virtuoso and Torrential Gearhulk.
And keeping a pretty healthy amount of cards in hand, using that Torrential Gearhulk instead of going for a spell that, it would have been gone if he had gone for, say, the Essence Scatter. That doesn't increase his hand at all. Instead, he goes for Glimmer of Genius, actually goes up 2 cards in hand. Didn't even need to spend one from his hand as far as the Glimmer of Genius, just the Torrential Gearhulk, which stays on the battlefield. He's got to be feeling good.
Yeah, now an interesting play that could happen here is Kevin can play Glimmer of Genius to make 2 more energy, which would allow him to go for a double block on this Glintsleeve Siphoner, which is just incredible. He's actually using the Glimmer of Genius as a removal spell on this Glintsleeve Siphoner while it's also scrying for 2 and drawing him 2 cards.
And because the Glimmer of Genius adds 2 energy as part of its scry 2, draw 2, that puts Kevin Jones up to the 4 energy required. The activation cost of this Whirler Virtuoso,
exactly. Yep. 3
energy, and like you said, the Menace ability looked like an opening for Justin Andrus, and now gets to throw these 2 creatures in front of it. Backbreaking, just so cleanly eliminated that threat.
Yeah, and Kevin Jones, the perfect card again. Justin tapping out there, trying to eternalize that Champion of Wits, and Kevin has Disallow, and able to use the other text on that besides counter target spell to counter the activated ability there on Champion of Wits.
Normally that eternalize ability is so safe, but counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, this Disallow goes beyond what you would normally expect from something like a cancel. And now we see a massive swing in from Torrential Gearhulk, 2 Thopters, a Whirler Virtuoso. Justin Andrus finds himself at 4, and a Teferi entering the battlefield. This has got to be all but locked up for Kevin Jones in Game 2.
Yeah, and I mentioned this is how Kevin thought the matchup was going to play out when he saw what his opponent was playing.
And there it is, the scoop from Justin Andrus. This is going to be a Game 3. We really got to see both of these control decks enact their game plan in Game 1, watching Justin Andrus really take his time against this sort of disabled game plan of Kevin Jones eventually putting down this Search for his Kanta alongside the Teferi, or attempting to, putting out these threats, drowning Kevin in that advantage. And in Game 2, we really see Kevin Jones show the aggression that his deck can move itself into after some of these exchanges.
Yeah, Kevin Jones, his deck has a lot of different angles. The fact that he can apply pressure while also being a control deck with more counter magic and more card draw than Justin's means that Justin is really stretched thin, because Justin's deck is so good at beating creature decks that when he has a sideboard plan against a control deck, he completely morphs his plan so that he no longer can really have a chance against those creatures. So now he has to figure out what that sweet spot is in the middle, because he needs to be able to interact with cards like Whirler Virtuoso if he wants a chance against Kevin, but he also needs to be sideboarding in such a way that his deck is actually well-suited to win a control mirror. So a careful dance probably is going to require Justin to do some in-depth thought on how he's going to sideboard. You come into a tournament, you have preset sideboarding plans, but you play against a weird deck, a deck you're not used to playing against, and you have to throw all of that out the window and really adapt to how your opponent is sideboarding against you.
Yeah, and maybe we can have the opportunity to take a look at these deck lists once more. It looks like Kevin Jones is going to make sure that he's pretty focused for Game 3. But even when we're entering into that one, let's take another look at the Kevin Jones Jeskai control deck, how this is going to be approaching into its Game 3. You talked a little bit about how he might make some considerations as opposed to when he's on the play, like in that Game 2, as opposed to when he's on the draw. Is there anything that's really standing out to you as the cards that might shift about because of that?
Yeah, so I think that on the play, the removal spells aren't necessarily very important. I think on the draw, Kevin is going to want some amount of Magma Spray in order to interact with both Glint Sleeve Siphoner and Champion of Winds, more so Glint Sleeve Siphoner. In that last game, we saw that Kevin's plan against Champion of Wits was simply to let it happen and to ignore it. There's nothing in Kevin's deck that Champion of Wits trades with. Everything in his deck can attack into a Champion of Wits. The only thing he needs to worry about is the Eternalize on that card. So that's not a card Kevin is concerned with killing. What Kevin is concerned with killing is a turn 2 Glint Sleeve Siphoner. So I'm really interested to see if there is spot removal in Kevin's deck here for Game 3, because in Game 2 it looked like he had sideboarded all of it out.
All right, and we might have time to take a quick look at this Esper control deck. Is there anything that quickly stands out to you as far as other considerations that he might make on a play draw? Now, this deck's a little bit more unusual.
Yeah, so there are obvious cards that he's taking out of his deck coming into Game 2 here, and I think the play draw is much more similar for somebody like Justin Andrus, though I think that his sideboarding decisions may change coming into this Game 3. Now he's more aware of the way that Kevin's deck is capable of playing out. Kevin's deck is not just a draw-go control deck like the blue-white decks we're used to seeing in the standard format. Whirler Virtuoso gives him a different angle of attack, and Whirler Virtuoso is going to prove to be an issue if Justin Andrus decides that he can cut all those inexpensive removal spells out of his deck.
Yeah, definitely an interesting balance to walk, and an interesting position that Kevin Jones has been probably putting his opponents all weekend.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and we see these cards that are supposed to be so good against the control decks that are in Justin's deck, cards like Champion of Wits, and that card is not good against Kevin. So it's these cards that in your head, this is a great card against blue-white control, and you're playing against a control deck that plays blue and white. This card should be wonderful.
If A, then B.
Yeah.
But this time it's C.
Absolutely.
So we have got Jeskai control, Esper control, heading into Game 3 here in the semifinals. Kevin Jones up against Justin Andrus. This is the final game that will decide one of our competitors on the U.S. national team.
Yeah, whoever wins here, they're going to be on the team. They get to play in the finals.
For Kevin Jones, that would be a return to the team. He's been previously on that team with actually Owen Turnwald, who we faced off in the quarterfinals. For Justin Andrus, pretty fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, I love Kevin's story of how he qualified for the national team the first time. The Nationals qualifier was in Philadelphia, and he was going to Philadelphia to catch a flight to go to some other Magic tournament. And he got stuck in traffic and missed his flight to go to the other Magic tournament, was super frustrated, ended up staying with friends there, and then played in the World Magic Cup qualifier that year, and then won it.
So unintentional that he was even there, and he ends up at the top tables and representing the U.S.
Yeah, so that was Kevin's first qualification for the U.S. national team.
My goodness. It's not too often that you get to miss a flight and be happy about it, is it? So Justin Andrews is going to kick things off of the fetid pools back to Kevin Jones. And let's go ahead and take a look. The mana issues were not present in that last game. Let's see if really we can get just a matchup of these two control decks going pound for pound. It's going to be Search for Azcanta on turn 2. That is a massive step for this game.
Absolutely. Getting that card down before Counter Magic can fight with it, super important.
Kevin's going to return with his own. It's a Search for Azcanta against a Search for Azcanta, but who is going to find it first? It's the race.
And it looks like Justin's working hard to be the first one to find it. With a deck full of cards like Chart of Course and Champion of Wits, Justin is much better at flipping that Search for Azcanta very fast.
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about that Chart of Course in the first game of this one, and now we're going to really see a way that it can pay off for Justin Andrews as a way to get an additional card, really 2 additional cards, into that graveyard, both from the one that you cast as well as what you discard.
Yeah, it's precisely true.
Champion of Wits, the 2-1 on the battlefield for Kevin Jones. It's just a pass back, leaving up 3 mana, one of them in Ether Hub. He's got an energy available, and it's that swing in for 2, knocking Kevin Jones down to 18. 4 mana on the side of Justin Andrus, and we are going to see that very same Chart of Course. Taking a look at the top 2. Now we have attacked this turn. There is a raid ability on this Chart of Course, which means that when you draw those 2 cards, you discard a card unless you attacked with a creature this turn. Raid may not be printed on the card, but it certainly feels like it's there.
Yeah, and I mean, that's great for Justin. Paying 2 mana to draw 2 cards, that allows him to leave open 2 mana for something like Negate, something like Essence Scatter. I think Justin has shown us why Chart of Course is in his deck, and these post-board interactions with something like Glintsleeve Siphoner and Champion of Wits are pretty impressive.
4 mana here for Kevin Jones. Continues to just draw and then go, not using a whole lot of his mana, just this Search for Azcanta that's been doing anything so far, putting a couple of lands in those graveyard. For Justin Andrus, we're going to put an Essence Scatter into the graveyard here, decides that that is not a card that he needs at the moment.
Yeah, and I think Kevin's really hoping that Justin tries to affect the board this turn. If Justin does so, then Kevin can counter whatever Justin tries to cast, and then Kevin gets an opening to cast Teferi, which he can use to start generating advantage and hopefully to flip that to put that Search for Azcanta back on the following turn before it has an opportunity to flip.
Looks like that's not going to be the case, though. Search for Azcanta, and he likes the top card of his library. It is that Teferi. I wonder if he might also be looking for the opportunity to do something at the end step, maybe a Glimmer of Genius, which we've seen before, to really start that fight. He's either going to go up cards and quality of cards, or he's going to end up in a fight with Justin that Kevin can really untap and succeed in.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And Kevin understands these control mirrors well. He knows that the first person really to go for a big play is often the person who's going to lose the game. And he doesn't want to be that first person.
The only problem with that strategy, though, is that the Champion of Wits is already on the battlefield. So how long can you play this draw-go game plan when the pressure is already there? Now, it is a slow clock. It's just a 2-1. But it's there, and every turn that they pass, it's another 2 damage.
I think the 2 damage a turn can essentially just be ignored entirely by Kevin.
Really?
Yeah, your life total is a resource, and when you're in a matchup that's a control mirror, it's a resource you don't really need to care about. Kevin can just sit there and take 2 damage at a time. Eventually, he's going to resolve something like a Whirler Virtuoso or a Torrential Gear Hulk, and then that 2-1 body becomes irrelevant.
Look at this. We've got a Hostage Taker coming down to the battlefield. That is a card that we haven't seen for quite some time. It is a powerful blue-black card, also a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, it's going to be interacting with the board. It's going to exile an artifact or a creature. Not a whole lot of options.
Yeah, I think Justin may even want to be exiling his own Champion of Wits there so that he has a threat that when it dies will make a champion enter the battlefield.
That 2/3 is going to
protect it from a removal spell, if you will.
The 2/3 gets hit by a Syncopate, and it's going to go to the exile zone because that's what Syncopate says. When in doubt, do what the card says. So, the Champion of Wits remains on the battlefield for now. That Hostage Taker unable to do anything except really kind of, force Kevin Jones to discard that counter spell with a little bit of mana attached. So,
yeah, and this play from Justin is interesting because it leaves open 2 mana, so he casts a card like Negate. So he's kind of enticing Kevin into going for something like Teferi on that turn.
There's that copy of the Eldest Reborn. We saw it when we were looking at the main deck for Justin Andrus. He has decided that that's not the card that he's looking for right now. That, getting rid of a creature or a planeswalker, not going to be a relevant ability at the moment. And there's also just, the creatures in the graveyard are lacking at the moment.
Now that Kevin has access to 6 mana, that means that he can pick fights with powerful spells on Justin's end step. So Justin's going to need cards like Essence Scatter if he wants to stay in this game.
There is the Scarab God, and Kevin Jones is going to probably have to fight this. It's going to be a disallowed. This is going to spend 3 of his mana, leaving up an Ether Hub as well as... Oh, and it looks like that's actually going to just resolve. Did not have to fight that fight. Doesn't look like we got a negate from Justin Andrus. He does have one in hand. Maybe trying to signal that the coast is clear, much similar to what he did with this Hostage Taker.
Yeah, I think Justin correctly recognizes that if he taps out, plays a counterspell to counter that disallow, that gives Kevin the opportunity to play a Teferi and bury the Scarab God, in which case Justin would be very far behind.
Yeah. So Kevin Jones heading into his turn, and Justin Andrus has been playing this pretty nicely so far, never really leaving that 2 mana astray, making sure that his negate remains available, and just really kind of trying to poke that barrier anytime that he can. We saw the Hostage Taker get cast. We saw the Scarab God kind of getting tested down to the battlefield, and it's going to be the Teferi here from Kevin Jones. Justin Andrus has got the opportunity to try and fight over this with this negate in hand, though I believe that Kevin Jones has got 1 to match it. This does mean that his mana is going to be a little bit constrained, though, because he gets to untap 2 lands, but can he do anything with those 2 lands? I think he's got a land in hand and a Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, and Kevin resolving this Teferi is a very big deal. Justin Andrus, I think, has a Teferi of his own, which he can minus, so that's going to help a lot. But I believe Kevin even has a cycling land, so when Justin goes for that play to bury that Teferi, Kevin can make sure that he's able to find that Teferi much faster himself alongside that Search for Azcanta.
It's time to transform this Search for Azcanta into a regular Azcanta, and Kevin Jones, he ends up picking up a Magma Spray off of that draw ability from the Teferi, so a potential option if he wants to try and fight over this Champion of Wits.
Uh-huh. And I mean, that Magma Spray means that the Champion of Wits is even less relevant than it was before.
I mean, it's been 2 damage. It's done its deal. It's done a damage. It drew 2 cards, discarded 2 cards, and now it's a Teferi on the battlefield fighting Teferis. But we're going to see if that minus ability is just going to bury the opposing one, put it 3 cards down.
And I imagine it will, yeah.
That's going to be the case. With Kevin Jones not having a whole lot of ways to really attack back into that Teferi, it's an especially powerful play.
Yeah, so now underneath 2 cards, lucky for Kevin, he has a cycling land, and he has the trigger off the Search for Azcanta, so that means that Kevin is going to get an opportunity to once again cast Teferi on the following turn. And
we're seeing this again. We've seen it in multiple of these control mirrors that we've been keeping track of so far today and a little bit yesterday. Once one player taps out for their big play, we're going to keep seeing that exchange back and forth, just trying to eke out whatever advantage they can while their opponent has tapped out their mana, but also leaving themselves vulnerable until one of them can come out on top. And that's partly what makes Teferi such a powerful play, is that he actually untaps your lands for you.
That's true. So Kevin, flipping this, he's leaving that card on top, and that's not the Teferi that got buried, so let's see what that is.
Oh, I think that was a Walking Ballista.
Ooh, very, very nice. That is an excellent card to have in this spot. Unfortunately for Kevin, I believe Justin does have an Essence Scatter in hand.
Oof.
But, and you gotta
try for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful enough card in this spot where
we see him lining up 4 mana on one side. I think he's also got a Glimmer of Genius in hand that he might be considering going for, as well as a Torrential Gearhulk. Here is going to be the Walking Ballista, and that is going to be the Essence Scatter that ends up eliminating it. On the bright side, that does mean that Kevin Jones remains with a Teferi on top of his library, but this is going to go back to Justin Andrus, who's going to get the opportunity to plus this Teferi, spend a little bit of mana, and then untap it once more. Combined with this Azcanta, the Sunken Rune, that is a potentially massive advantage.
That's definitely true. So Justin here now seeing a negate and a Doomfall off of this Search for Escanta, or this Escanta the Sunken Ruin activation. Then he's going to get to untap the Escanta the Sunken Ruin on his end step. He'll be able to keep that negate in his hand. Kevin finding himself in the situation where he has kind of fallen behind, though he definitely has the ability to fight back in. That Essence Scatter, super important there for Justin. A card that a lot of players are tempted to trim in post-boarding games and matchups like this. He needed that to counter that Walking Ballista, and it ended up working out very well for him.
And just to put into perspective the kind of advantage that we're about to have based on this Teferi as well as this Escanta the Sunken Ruin. A turn for Justin Andrews. Draw for turn, draw from the Teferi, activate the Escanta, draw, take a look at 4 cards. So now we've looked at 6 cards, take another card there, pass the turn, untap the Escanta, activate it again, another 4 cards, another card, drawing 4 cards after looking at the top 10 every single time he untaps. That is an incredible advantage. In this sort of control mirror, Justin Andrews is really pulling ahead.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting here that I've been really impressed with is Kevin's patience with this Gear Hulk. I think that may give Kevin an opportunity to get in here, because if Justin doesn't have an answer this turn for that Gear Hulk, it could attack and kill that Teferi. I think Justin could just replay another Teferi.
He does have another one in hand, yes.
Just to ensure that he has victory. But it looks right now like Justin has put himself in a really good position to win.
And there is going to be a Doomfall. We're going to see a 3-minute response from that. It's going to be Glimmer of Genius. So before this Doomfall resolves, Kevin is going to be looking to refill his hand a little bit and then offer that to Justin Andrews for the ability to kind of pick it apart. How do you feel about casting this spell before the Doomfall actually resolves? Because he's going to get to take a look at the 2 cards that you draw.
I think Kevin's more concerned with the Glimmer getting pulled from his hand. He just wants to find 2 powerful cards on the top of his deck. He's going to activate that Search on Justin's end step anyway. He knows Justin can't really apply much pressure here. There's no champion in the graveyard. Remember, Magma Spray exiled it. The pressure that's happening here is just from the Teferi. So Kevin looking to just stay on par in terms of card advantage, and the Glimmer in conjunction with that Search for Escanta allows him to do that.
So taking a look here, a couple of abilities on the stack, and Justin Andrews just counting up his mana. He's got access to that Escanta himself. He could activate that one and still have 4 mana available for the turn. Right now, the stack looks like a Doomfall at the bottom of it. That got cast, and we have got a Glimmer of Genius on top of that one from Kevin Jones. Right now, we're looking to see if these players are willing to let this stack resolve as is at the moment, and we might just be getting a quick little double check of some potential interactions here from Justin Andrews. When you're looking at a play like this, you know, this Teferi might be able to get answered by this Torrential Gear Hulk, but from Kevin's side of the battlefield, his options are getting a little bit limited. What are, you know, some potential options that he could take? Is answering the Teferi enough in the face of that kind of card advantage for this couple of turns?
I mean, it's definitely important. I don't know if it's necessarily enough. I think the way one of these players engineers victory is by combining Teferi with Escanta the Sunken Ruin. And right now, we already have the Esper deck doing that, whereas the Jeskai deck, you know, tried to assemble that combination, but was just one step behind. And on a key turn where the Jeskai player thought that Walking Ballista for 2 was going to get them back into the game, it didn't work out. And Kevin, I think he might be a little bit frustrated too. He might be he could have cast the Walking Ballista for less mana. He could have just gone for the Teferi there. But there's no way of really knowing. I mean, there are way more cards that counter Teferi that are going to be in that Esper deck than there are cards that would counter the Walking Ballista in that spot.
Yeah, notably, Kevin does have his own copy of Teferi. This is the one that got touched by that one that's on the battlefield previously. So potentially by doing some combination of both the Teferi and the Torrential Gear Hulk, some of his absolute most powerful cards, he could maybe try and get the advantage back on his side. So we're taking a look at how this interaction is going, and looks like I guess I couldn't quite say, I'm not a judge myself, but we're going to let this issue resolve itself, and then we are going to take a look Just making sure to verify that the board state is accurate, that everything is good and solid before proceeding with this game.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a bit confused about what happened. I believe Justin had plus the Teferi there.
And there we go. Now we are going to see the Doom fall after this, slight reversal of things, and then I bet we're probably going to see a very similar sequence of events that actually comes back down to the battlefield here. And it looks like it is going to be that Glimmer of Genius that comes down, and we're right back to where we were. And that's going to be a negate from Justin Andrus. That's going to eliminate the Glimmer of Genius. We're going to get to take a look in here. It's Teferi and it's Torrential Gearhulk, his 2 best spells, but because he does not get to fight that fight, he is going to be in trouble losing the best of these. That Azcanta might become his only hope.
Yeah, I think that Kevin needs to find the right answers here. He has this Azcanta going. I do think that he has more interactive spells in his deck for the particular matchup, though he is behind on mana by 2, and that is essentially 4 because of the Teferi untapping 2 lands a turn.
Gotcha. And it looks like we just had a little bit of issue as far as, whether or not second land got played. There was just, I think there was in the length of the turn, but one ended up going back to the hand and then proceeding with the turn. So, the Teferi on the battlefield, and it's heading into Kevin Jones's turn. What can he make happen with this? 8 mana currently available. The Azcanta still around. I think he was able to find a Glimmer of Genius, and I think I might see... I don't want to speculate if I didn't see it, but that does look like a Walking Ballista to me. That could be a card that, if there isn't the counter magic from Justin Andrus, could really convert into turning this around.
Yeah, I think that Kevin just tapping all 8 of his mana, crossing his fingers, and dropping a Walking Ballista on the battlefield might be a pretty good strategy. Looks
like Kevin Jones is going to go for the Teferi instead, and we're going to see an activation of this Azcanta in return. Kevin Jones may be setting his sights on being able to make this play as well as activating his Azcanta and trying to get back into this race between the 2 Teferis. And it's going to be a Doomfall here from Justin Andrus. That's not a counterspell. Possibly a step in the right direction of making sure that this resolves, though. That is going to be a fine answer to the Teferi once Justin Andrus actually gets the opportunity to untap, because it... Actually, I guess he really only gets to take a look at the hand.
Yeah, I think that there is a Teferi for Justin to be able to use to tuck Kevin's Teferi, if you will, on the following turn. But now Kevin is kind of pressuring things interestingly in his own way, because Justin, if he wants to tuck that Teferi, has to -3 his own. He can replay another one, though, and that's something that Kevin did not know about.
Yeah,
whereas Justin has 2 extra Teferis in hand at the ready.
Oh, no. Kevin Jones makes a play that he thinks is going to just force this other Teferi off the battlefield, which in many cases he might absolutely be correct about, but Justin has the ability to make that play and then actually end the turn with a Teferi with really 2 loyalty higher than the one that we currently have access to. Kevin Jones trying to put in the good fight against Justin Andrus here in Game 3 of the semifinals. We've got 2 Teferis on the battlefield. Justin with a couple of options. It's going to be a Doomfall. Maybe just try to make sure that everything is on the up and up before he starts trying to make this sequence. You don't want to destroy your own Teferi, try and deploy another one, get that punished by a counterspell. We take a look at 2 Glimmer of Geniuses, as well as that Walking Ballista. Justin Andrus has got to be thinking, its shield's down, it's time to go.
Yeah, I think that Justin realizes Kevin here doesn't have any counter magic. Even when he activates that as kind of the Sunken Ruin, he will not be able to pay for any counter magic. So the opening is there. He can minus this Teferi, recast another one, plus it, untap some lands, and pass the turn.
Taking a look at these cards, though, Justin, just considering how the fabric of his hand is going to line up against this, he decides to take one of his Glimmer of Genius. Those are really the main card advantage spell at instant speed that Kevin Jones has access to. We're going to end up using the ability of this Teferi. Those Glimmer of Genius also able to get Kevin Jones closer once again to that Teferi. With this one, getting tucked under the library, his Glimmer of Genius actually does have the ability to get him right back to it.
Yeah, and even the search for Azcanta. He's got a wealth of riches at this point in terms of ways to build card advantage, despite being, seemingly behind by all accounts.
We're going to play down another copy of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. We know that there's actually yet another one in Justin Andrus's hand. So these Teferis are going to be absolute powerhouses. There has been nothing as of yet that can really interact with that Azcanta, which means that this combination between Teferi and Azcanta, the ability to look at 10 cards a turn, is very much alive and well right now. Looks like in response to this, we're going to see Kevin Jones try and fire off that Glimmer of Genius.
Yeah, so Kevin sees a pair of very good cards there. Finds himself a Disallow and a Teferi.
All right, well, I guess he had one coming up anyway, so I think the other card on top of his library right now is a copy of that Teferi. He had the option of, I think, scrying one to the bottom and then choosing to draw the one that he knew about, but chose not to.
Yeah, so here, Kevin with the Teferi of his own. These players, Teferi's bouncing Teferis. It's something we're seeing a lot of in this game.
It's a Teferi fight. Kevin Jones is going to end up with 2 of them in his hand. That's going to match the several that Justin Andrus has had access to as well. And it looks like we are going to be activating 4. The Teferi, not a whole lot of interaction from Justin Andrus at the moment. But it looks like in response to that ability, we're going to go ahead and fire off Vraska's Contempt Exile. That Planeswalker gained 2 life. That's going to put Justin Andrus up to 22. That life total change, not too relevant as you hinted at earlier in this matchup.
Yeah, Kevin's probably going to counter this, though.
Ooh, a Disallow here from Kevin Jones. This does mean that it's now going to be a Teferi on 5 up against a Teferi on 5. Though both players struggling a little bit, he gets to untap 2 of these lands, chooses not to go for the Azcanta, instead choosing 2 of these blue-red lands. That's 3 mana available on Kevin Jones' side. Could mean any number of counter spells up against Justin Andrus, who's got just a wealth of riches when it comes to mana.
Yeah, and now Justin, he's got this Teferi on 5. But if he minuses this Teferi and puts it down to 2, he knows that Kevin Jones has that Walking Ballista in hand. So he's kind of opening up to let the Teferi die to the Walking Ballista. So a lot of interesting stuff happening here. Normally when the stage of the game is such that both players have, not both players, but a player has a flipped Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, has Teferi, Hero of Dominaria in play, that means the game's over. But here, both players have it, and they're constantly fighting to put away the other person's Teferi. Justin has more lands. I'd have to say he's at an advantage here because of that. But this game is far from over. Yeah,
and like you said with Justin Andrus also, I don't believe he has another Teferi in hand, though. Risking this one, going for that minus ability. Kevin Jones is the other one, but this was the second Teferi that Justin Andrus had access to.
In that case, this is a really interesting play for him. This is a super interesting turn because he has to get that Teferi off the table.
And we are going to go ahead and activate this Azcanta, taking a look at what we can find. Ooh, and this is a big card that you touched on earlier as a card that could really break this game wide open. That is Argyl's Bloodfest. Phenomenally powerful enchantment. It for just 2 mana. Suddenly you can just start drawing cards and paying life with whatever excess mana that you have. This is going to be huge for Justin Andrus.
Yeah, and it's funny because at this point it's just like a wealth of riches in terms of card advantage for both players. And it's just kind of this war to prevent other people's Teferis from getting like too high to the point that, one player gets an emblem. It's going to be really hard for them to pressure each other in other ways. The Bloodfast can change that, though, because it means that Justin will likely continue to hit land drops even though he has this many lands.
What an interesting situation to be. How do I want to draw a card? I've got this Azcanta, I've got the Teferi, I've got this Argyl's Bloodfast. It's just so hard to decide.
This game could be decided by decking even.
That's true. It would be very interesting because as far as just total cards drawn, I'd be curious to see who's actually gone through more on Kevin Jones' side. He's got this access to the Glimmer of Genius. On Justin Andrus' side, he's had control of a Teferi for a longer period of time, as well as having access to that chart, of course.
And Champion of Wits.
Champion of Wits. That is interesting. In the final game, is there a chance that neither of these players are really able to put down the pressure to solidify a game through anything more than just running out of cards in the library? And I don't think that I have seen a commit to memory myself.
I think he has one in his 75.
Temple,
I may be wrong.
So that is the back end of that Argos Bloodfast, that Temple of Akhlazot's, but that Argos Bloodfast is the one that is currently on the battlefield. It's going to take quite a bit more life loss on Justin Andrus' side to really activate that one. We see this Walking Ballista come down to the battlefield. 3 counters on it for 6 mana, no interaction from Justin Andrus, and we see it go down 2 counters, just like you described, eliminating that Teferi from the battlefield, and we're going to see a duress here from Justin Andrus. We see a Teferi that is opposing. Knew about that one as it was coming up, and now it is just a lone Walking Ballista up against also the engine of Justin Andrus and this Argos Bloodfast.
Yeah. So I think Justin did have his... Ooh, okay.
Vraska's Contempt, and Kevin Jones electing not to put the last counter on it, focusing instead on his Azcanta, the Sunken Rune. There is a world in which he could have tried to fire that one down. We are not going to gain the 2 life, however. That Walking Ballista removing its last counter, dealing 1 damage to Justin Andrus, and then going to the graveyard before that Vraska's Contempt can die, or remove it.
Absolutely, and I think Kevin correctly recognizes that Azcanta the Sunken Rune activation has a lot more value to him than 1 damage.
Whew. And we're going to find a Teferi off of this one. The Battling Teferis is back. Thought it was gone for a little bit. We saw Duress take away 1. We saw the Walking Ballista remove the other. Then Justin Andrus returns back with his own. But Kevin Jones is going to return in kind. 2 mana available for Justin Andrus, so he does have some options with this Argos Bloodfast. And let's see if Kevin Jones, with whatever he drew for the turn... Ooh, that was a disallow. So he now has the ability to defend his own Teferi.
Yeah, and he's going to now probably activate this search for Azcanta right now. I imagine. Untap 2 lands?
No, and I'm really curious about maybe potentially what he drew. The other option, I think he's only got the 1 card in hand, right? Yeah, so he did. Though, in doing so, if he had activated that Azcanta...
Similar position. This makes him better against Syncopate, so...
True, and it also means that really that Azcanta would not have been able to activate once more if he had done so, because untapping, he would have to pay the 4. Oh, no, actually, he would have had the mana after...
Oh, no, he'd be 1 shy.
He
would be 1 shy.
Right. Oh, yep. So the disallow happens here, and now it's just 4 mana that remains for Kevin Jones here. That disallow was able to remove. Oh my goodness. Not exactly the position. I think that's the Eldest Reborn. That was attempted there. Target opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker they control.
Yeah, so it would have killed that Teferi, then it would have made Kevin discard a card, then it would have put a Torrential Gearhulk onto the battlefield. That's a scary card.
That library is looking pretty small on Justin Andrus' side. That is not, like, shuffling that library is going to be an easy task, and you might as well. Oh my goodness. So Kevin Jones, he is going to end up having his own Teferi minused by the opposing Teferi. We've been seeing that quite a bit, that minus ability really going all in, and now we are going to see a Glint Sleeve Siphoner get an attack in. This is going to put Justin Andrus up to his 2nd energy. Do you want to draw the 2nd card next turn? Kevin Jones down to 8. I think that might very well be his decision, though. I don't think that there's so few cards that Justin Andrus is going to be electing not to draw cards in favor of, trying to deal that damage with this Glint Sleeve Siphoner. I think there's enough damage coming down that pipeline.
Yeah, I think that Justin sees, he only has to attack 4 times with this Glint Sleeve Siphoner to win the game. I think he has a Scarab God in hand also, which could, with the amount of mana that he has, if he's able to resolve that spell, it can kind of just allow him to go off, if you will. I mean, he can start returning creatures to play, he'll get completely out of hand.
Kevin does find the Magma Spray, however, after activating this Azcanta, the Sunken Rune, as his first real play of the turn. We're going to fire that one down as well. And taking a look at how this mana base kind of shaped up for Kevin Jones, not great as far as actually playing down a Teferi. No white mana currently available. It's going to be back to Justin Andrus, who's going to draw a card. He's going to end up tapping some lands at the end step here. There is our 5 mana, and this is going to resolve for Justin Andrus. He's got an enormous amount of mana available as well. Any of those creatures that he might be looking to get, and we are going to eliminate that Teferi from Kevin Jones's hand. He's in top deck mode. He's at 8 life against a Scarab God, and he needs to draw fire.
Yeah, this is the This has been a super tight game. Justin has piloted his way beautifully through this. And, there was that key turn where we saw Kevin resolve the Teferi and look like he was about to pull ahead. But Justin, having a Teferi of his own, able to bury Kevin's Teferi while also leaving open counter magic, while also having a turn where Kevin couldn't really do much. It was that Essence Scatter on that Torrential Gearhulk, and from there this all snowballed out of control, and Justin Andrus.
It is a whirler.
Pretty impressive.
Though. So Justin Andrus, Esper Control, and definitely a deck. I mean, I was looking at that deck list, and I'm not. You probably noticed as well. That looked like a lot of 4-ofs, and that card sticking out. That looked like a 61-card main deck, something that you don't normally get to see. Are we going to see a 61 cards in the finals? 121 to kick things off. How about that?
I imagine. I imagine we will. It's very unlikely to me that we will not see 61 cards at this point.
You mean Nargle's Bloodfast, a Teferi, a Scarab God, and his Kanta just, are unbeatable?
Not unbeatable, but very unlikely to be beaten.
Tough to beatable.
Yes.
All right, we're going to bring back the Walking Ballista out of Kevin Jones's graveyard with this Scarab God, with so much mana on Justin Andrus' side of the battlefield as well, plus that life loss, plus that scry from the Scarab God. This game is looking pretty finalized. Has enough mana to actually activate 3 times on this Walking Ballista, turning it into a 7/7, but also just able to get a shot in for 3.
Yeah, and he can just shoot this this Thopter out of the sky with a Walking Ballista before it has an opportunity to block.
That's true, but it looks like actually Justin Andrus might even just be, okay,
Oh, all right.
sure, block. What's the rush?
Yeah, I guess there really is no rush at this point, especially if it has, any amount of counter magic.
No, it's just going to be Kevin Jones going into his turn and really just hoping for the best. It's a handshake from Kevin Jones. He draws the land, shows the hand, and just offers it up. Justin Andrus, that means that he is now going to be one of the representatives of the United States on the U.S. national team. Now that's what's left is battling for the finals, and he's going to be going up against the winner of this game, our other semifinals match. It's Matthew Nicolai, Dylan Brown, 1-1. We're entering into Game 3. This is that blue-black mirror, a mid-range fest on this battlefield.
Yeah, lots of blue-black mid-range doing well this weekend. I've seen this at the top tables the whole time. Matthew Nicolai and Dylan Brown. Throughout the weekend, we've been watching them both just play beautiful, beautiful matches. Matthew Nicolai's draft deck in the second draft was, the kind of deck where it can so easily fall apart, and yet he found a way to make it work. He got a 3-0 in the first seed pod in the tournament and was able to ride that wave all the way to being first seed coming into here in the top 8, and here he is playing for a spot in the U.S. national team.
Yeah, in this blue-black mid-range deck, both of these players have access to that Argos Bloodfast. One player has access to this Azcanta, the Sunken Rune, as well. Really, both players having, Field of Runes on Dylan Brown's side. We actually see 2 copies of Field of Runes, so he does have the ability to stop this Azcanta, the Sunken Rune. But every time they activate that, that's a little bit less into your Argos Bloodfast. This is going to be just really lots of life getting paid, lots of cards in hand. These players are not going to be living off the top of their deck.
No, they are not.
When we see Dylan Brown down to 8, we see Matthew Nicolai down to 14, and even just looking at the graveyards, I have got to think that most of this damage has been self-inflicted. We kind of joined in partway through, but even looking for the creatures in the graveyard, I see a Scarab God on one side. I see, a Champion of Wits and a Glintsleeve Siphoner on the other side, but really how much of these cards were able to get into this red zone and deal this damage, or has it been entirely these players keeping their hand full? It's going to be a Torrential Gearhulk from Dylan Brown, though, in response to this Liliana Death's Majesty.
Yeah, so Matthew Nicolai, looks like he has only 4 lands untapped, so he could dig 1 card deeper trying to find something like an Essence Scatter, or he could just let this Torrential Gearhulk resolve.
Looks like it's going to be the negate that ends up happening. Targeted right at that Liliana Death's Majesty. It would have the ability to actually put pressure on the battlefield through those zombies, which would be sort of this incremental value, but also that minus ability, there is the Scarab God in the graveyard, could just bring that right back.
Yeah, and against a deck that doesn't have any haste creatures or direct damage, if you cast Liliana Death's Majesty and you have a Scarab God in your graveyard, the vast majority of the time you're just pointing at that Scarab God and dropping it onto the table.
And actually, that's going to if I remember correctly, Liliana Death's Majesty does turn that creature into a zombie. It would count itself for its own upkeep trigger, wouldn't it?
It does.
Whew.
Huh?
That's just good deck building.
Yes.
Torrential Gearhulk ready to run on Dylan Brown's side of the battlefield, and Arguel's Bloodfast beside it, which is why you'll see both of these cards completely loaded up on cards in hand. We saw Dylan Brown go down to 6. The only thing that is going to stop these players going down in their life total for these cards is going to be really at the very end considerations about, am I going to die if I'm at 2 or 1 life? Is the Scarab God really going to be the final nail in the coffin because I dealt 19 of that damage and the Scarab God dealt 1? And Dylan Brown a little bit closer to that range, but I don't think he's too worried just yet.
Yeah, 6 is a pretty nice number so that you can't just die to random Torrential Gearhulk happenings on your end step. The other thing, though, is that once the Bloodfast flips, you can start regaining life. Torrential Gearhulk, other cards, they can be sacrificed for big hunks of life if they need to be, and your opponent's going to have to try to kill them anyway, so it's not like you have to sacrifice them and actually lose the card. You're just, leaving that temple untapped, and then once you force your opponent to use a removal spell on your 5/6, then you sacrifice it and you gain 6 life.
Yeah, for that Temple of Aclazotz, I've also seen a really good grinding strategy from some players where they'll actually do that with their own Scarab God if the coast seems clear, if they're able to defend it. Each turn you can put that 5-mana investment into having a 5/5 on the battlefield, sacrifice it with your Temple of Aclazotz, gain the 5 life, and then you'll just be getting that card right back.
Yeah, I mean, you can also use it like that. That's true.
Taking a look at this hand, it's so interesting seeing a matchup that has gone this late with just neither of these players at all worried about, normally you expect to see these top deck situations living off the top of the deck, trying to put together a play with whatever resources are left. Every resource is left for these players.
Yeah, they both have access to all of their tools.
Mm-hmm. So
although Matthew Nicolai, it looks like he may need to tap out here, go for something like a Vraska's Contempt.
Yeah, and we do see Matthew Nicolai with only those 3 cards in hand after using that Liliana Death's Majesty, maybe trying to go for this Vraska's Contempt. It does mean that he was not drawing as many of the cards this turn, but that is going to be a pretty clean answer to this Torrential Gearhulk if Dylan Brown doesn't have anything to say about it. And that's kind of an interesting line to walk.
It is, absolutely. And these matchups are so interesting, right? Because they've both grinded down. They've both traded resources so effectively. But here we are, super deep in the game, right? We even joined the game super deep.
Mm-hmm.
And both these players, 9 lands on the battlefield. The difference now is that Matthew Nicolai, he has fewer cards in hand.
Yep. Though that's not going to be the case for long from the look of it. So we do end up having the Torrential Gearhulk hanging out, having a good time. It's going to knock Matthew Nicolai down to 7. 5 even, actually. Yeah, after paying that life off of his own Arguel's Bloodfast, he's going to pay an additional 2 life, going to go down to 5. Transform it now gives him, I guess, an additional land, but a little bit less ability to really grind in drawing those cards. And now the life totals of this game are so similar, 5 to 6, with a Torrential Gearhulk on the battlefield, and Dylan Brown feeling pretty confident. I see Vraska's Contempt, I see Essence Scatter, and I might even see a Scarab God in Dylan Brown's hand. Matthew Nicolai has got his work cut out for him.
So Matthew Nicolai here, he needs to pick a fight over this Torrential Gearhulk at some point in the next turn because it'll kill him if it attacks him. So we're likely going to see him go for some sort of upkeep play with a removal spell, and then there could be a counter war. The only other thing I could imagine is that he needs to play something to block, depending on how his draw steps were here.
Go ahead and clarify for me a little bit. Why would Matthew Nicolai choose this battle in the upkeep of Dylan Brown as opposed to maybe before combat or at any time, really?
So by doing it during Dylan Brown's upkeep, you deny Dylan Brown his draw step, which could potentially be another inexpensive counterspell. Also, because you're doing it on Dylan Brown's turn, it means that all of the mana that Dylan Brown tapped to fight that counter war will be tapped on your following turn to give you an opening to resolve one of your big spells.
So forcing Dylan Brown to hopefully tap out, going for this, big way to protect this Torrential Gearhulk, because if he wins, he wins. But in doing so, maybe losing a lot of those resources where you can untap and really have a big play on the return.
And it looks like Matthew Nicolai just went for this on his turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are still seeing that, that Torrential Gearhulk is still tapped, but it looks like Dylan Brown might actually just be okay with this. We see him draw, I think, a duress off of that Argul's Bloodfast, but maybe doesn't have a great way to interact with the non-creature spells. We know that there's the Essence Scatter, the Vraska's Contempt in hand, but doesn't look like there's a whole lot of ways for Dylan Brown to really stop Matthew Nicolai from doing this particular game plan. And it looks like that is going to be the case. That also does put Matthew Nicolai back up to 7 mana. The life total, not the most relevant thing, but it means that a Torrential Gearhulk coming out of nowhere doesn't necessarily mean the end for him.
So Matthew there chooses to, and that was actually an interesting decision, though. See, I've been trained over the years to think that upkeep is correct there, but the Bloodfast may change that, because if he has the Bloodfast in play, that means that gives Dylan an opportunity to draw into more cards, because he has access to more mana with a new untap step.
I see. So what you're saying, Dylan Brown could actually draw multiple cards at the end step, and then when he untaps, he could even still keep going for that.
And if you do need to resolve it by all means, then when Dylan Brown, tries to draw cards during the end step, that's probably when you go for it.
Gotcha. As Kanta firing off here, we do see a Vraska's Contempt, we see an Essence Scatter, and it looks like the Essence Scatter is going to be the takeaway from Matthew Nicolai, just trying to keep anything that's actually going to kill him off of the battlefield. 7-4. These life totals have been really bouncing around at the low levels. We saw Matthew Nicolai, his Argul's Bloodfast transforming into the Temple of Aclazotz. Dylan Brown still with an Argul's Bloodfast at the moment.
But soon to have a flipped Temple of his own.
Yeah. Temple fight. We've also got, actually really, it's interesting to me at just how far this Azcanta has made it in a lot of ways. We are now losing it. That Field of Ruin is finally activating it, but we saw a lot of patience there from Dylan Brown, waiting until it was sort of, the last opportunity to take that one down when it was going to be the most advantageous and force Matthew Nicolai to use some of his mana before Dylan Brown untaps.
Yeah, Dylan Brown really juiced this Bloodfast for the maximum number of cards. Absolute maximum.
Down to 2 life. It's going to be a duress to take a look at this hand, which is just a Torrential Gearhulk and an Essence Scatter. So we know what we're dealing with. It's also got 3 lands, though those do have the ability to be cycled, so Matthew Nicolai could end up recycling some of these into some new cards that would surprise Dylan Brown.
Yeah, Matthew Nicolai no longer has that draw engine. Really, the Torrential Gearhulk is the last egg in his basket.
And there is the Scarab God. We know about the Torrential Gearhulk for Matthew Nicolai, but we also know about the Essence Scatter for Dylan Brown. I think Matthew Nicolai's game plan is really coming down to trying to put together a game plan to fight over this Torrential Gearhulk so that he can use a Vraska's Contempt on that Scarab God. Otherwise, things are going to take a pretty bad turn for him.
Yeah, and I'm actually interested to ask Dylan after this match why he didn't flip his Bloodfast on this turn. Mm-hmm. If he had done so, he could have used that in some ways to defend the Scarab God from a card like Vraska's Contempt by sacrificing it and gaining 5 life, thus having it return back to his hand on the end step.
That's very interesting. Compared to the Vraska's Contempt, which would exile it entirely, give Matthew Nicolai some of the life gain, and just eliminate the Scarab God from contention by using your own Temple of Aclazotz. If Matthew Nicolai is fighting over this, you get to just kill it, gain some life, untap, and replay it.
Yeah, very interesting. I think the fact that he saw the Torrential Gearhulk, perhaps there's something else going on in his hand that we're unaware of there.
Well, I think there is an Essence Scatter, so it's possible that Dylan Brown just wants to make sure that he's got a little bit of opportunity there, but he's got 4 mana available. I don't know. It's definitely an interesting consideration. I'll be curious to hear what you hear from him.
Would definitely like to ask about that.
So Matthew Nicolai, 2 Field of Runes, though I don't think those are going to be relevant, a Temple of Aclazotz, and a whole pile of mana that he needs to survive with against this Scarab God. There are plenty of creatures to be brought back. This is going to be the Torrential Gearhulk, and this might be the fight that could very well decide your other U.S. national representative.
Dylan Brown's hand is stacked.
Yeah. Essence Scatter coming on down, and it's basically up to Matthew Nicolai to have an answer. That is not going to do it. What is the final card here? Another Torrential Gearhulk. Does Dylan Brown have a way to stop this, or is this actually going to be the card that can really buy Matthew Nicolai a huge amount of time? I think it's going to be. There we see a Vraska's Contempt. That's going to eliminate it. We do see it go to exile. Matthew Nicolai going back up to 9. Dylan Brown only at 2. He's got a handful of Vraska's Contempt, so I don't think that this Torrential Gearhulk is going to be the end-all, be-all answer. But Matthew Nicolai buying his way out of the Scarab God situation nicely. Double Torrential Gearhulk? What a dream.
Oh, he was at 2. He paid. Oh, my goodness. I think Dylan Brown may have paid his last 2 life for a Bloodfast.
Ooh. Paid all of it?
Yeah.
I don't know. At least I think they might be doing a quick little count up there. Maybe one of it, maybe 2 of it. Did you all 4 mana? Or the last went sideways. That could be.
Well, he was at 2.
Right.
He Essence Scattered. He had 2 mana left, and he tapped both his lands and pointed at the Bloodfast.
Oh no! Yeah. And let's see if we can get that Argos Bloodfast.
Maybe there was just some talking going on, but I don't know. Jeez, this is interesting. So there's going to be a judge call here. But what a fantastic game we've watched here. Dylan Brown, really, since we joined the game, has been in massive control. He's had this huge hand. Matthew Nicolai has never really had more than 3 cards to work with. Dylan just had piloted this very well, and now he's here. He's in this last turn of the game. It's going to be
think about
interesting
it
to hear
these
hear
players
the judge's take on this.
Have piloted blue-black mid-range all the way to this round in the semifinals. Functionally, kind of round 15, right? We ended on round 13 when it was in the Swiss. They have been piloting this deck in addition to their draft as well for an incredible amount of time.
So I think that this is definitely something that we should talk about because right now what's happening is there's a judge call, and when you're in these high pressure situations, you need to stay calm, and it's really, really hard to do so. And it looks like there's a possibility that Dylan Brown has paid his last 2 life here, and he was really far ahead this game. He could have won this game, and this is a tough moment. This is an emotional moment as a Magic player. This is something that's hard, and a lot of us have been here. A lot of us have been in a situation where we had a game locked up, a big game, a game that could have qualified us for the Pro Tour.
And just to clarify a little bit on the situation here, the reason why we do have a judge call, and it's not, this very clear situation, is that the judge call is taking a look at the life totals, a bit of a discrepancy, one player thinking that they were at 4, the other player thinking that they were at 2, getting a judge on scene to go over everything that's happened and make sure that we're really at the right spot, because otherwise, at 4 life, paying that 2 life to end up at 2, Dylan gets to untap. So seeing the resolution of this judge call could very well be kind of a deciding factor as to where this game was.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be. I guess that's the question here. But if Dylan is in fact at 2 and paid this last 2 life, then that's basically what I was getting at. Is that these mistakes are, these are the reasons we watch Magic. This is the drama. This is that feeling we get when we make a misplay in the finals of a PTQ and don't qualify. I've done that, on the drive home. I just thought about it the whole way. It's this thing that Magic is important to us, and it matters to us. And
Magic's
sometimes,
hard.
Sometimes we make mistakes, and the full gamut of emotions is at play here.
Yeah.
And when you're in the top 4 of a tournament, you feel those things.
And yeah, I mean, even discussing about the ruling potentially, if he was at 4 and he's paying this life, like you said, no matter the resolution of this judge call, he's going to need to really kind of keep his posture. If he gets to untap and head into his next turn, this is going to be a situation in which he needs to keep his nerves together. He needs to keep it calm. He needs to keep it collected. These players have fought through such a trial this weekend, playing against an incredibly talented field of players. There's a higher density of some of the best players in the world. Your odds of playing against them are much higher. Very likely both of these have been near or around or against some phenomenal Magic players. And at the end of this journey, they are, close to being the U.S. national representative.
Yeah, I mean, they've made it deep. There were almost 800 people here this weekend.
Oh, my goodness.
There are only 4 people remaining. These people are in the top 0.5% of the people in the room in terms of how well they've done this weekend.
That is just, it doesn't matter how you slice it. That is such an impressive way to look at the accomplishment of these players. And, you know, one way or another, these players, you know, one of these players is going to be battling to say that they are the U.S. national champion.
Yeah, it's an exciting thing. It's a big opportunity. And these players were playing almost identical decks.
Yeah.
When you looked at their main decks, I think the main deck might have been 2 at most cards different. So this has really been a grind. The last match, the control match we watched that went to 3 games, that was an intense match where, you know, I can't even imagine what happened over here, that this was still going on once all of that finished.
And I want to bring your attention a little bit back to maybe just give you the opportunity to elaborate a bit more on a situation we saw where Matthew Nicolai was deciding when he wanted to fight over that Scarab God, or that opposing Torrential Gearhulk with a Vraska's Contempt. It's at the upkeep, and then we sort of saw him go for it during the main phase, and we didn't have a phenomenal opportunity to really kind of elaborate on how much of a difference that can make, or when you would really want to break out of these sort of learned habits.
Yeah, and you know, I thought he'd gone to 2. Mm-hmm. You know, we'd had the conversation. It seemed that way. So, you know, unless something happened differently, we even talked about he used that Bloodfast to its maximum ability. Mm-hmm. You know, there's no more blood fasting to be done. So if the life total discrepancy is wrong, I think that you know, we all kind of like had a pretty big miss there, and that's possible. A lot was going on in this game. I mean, we've been watching this game for maybe 4 or 5 turn cycles, and each player has seen upwards of, you know, 10 cards more maybe. Mm-hmm. So a lot going on here.
And what an interesting way to dive into the game. Like you said, we dove into this, it just already feeling that emotional investment as we watch these players go through it, but really we missed Game 1, we missed Game 2, we've missed a good portion of Game 3, but we got right into the thick of it here at Game 3 after watching Kevin Jones up against his now U.S. national team member, Nicolai.
Yeah, so Matthew Nicolai here, at the 2 of them, and Dylan Brown. Like, looking at the 2 of them, this is, I love this camera angle, by the way. And I understand this is a weird thing to say that, you know, is that I love. But these 2 players, there's so much emotion right now in this shot, because this is going to decide who wins this game. If Dylan was, you know, actually at 2, then this match is over.
Yes.
And Matthew won. If he was not, then this match is over and Dylan won. Matthew has no cards left in his hand. Dylan, look at him with that huge grip. He has a Field of Ruin. Even if something crazy happens, Dylan has got this one.
He's also got multiple copies of Vraska's Contempt in hand that he'll be able to deploy. And you can just see the tension of this moment etched on both of their faces as they're trying to fight through this one. Now, I think the question that a lot of people are going to have, because we do sort of have a sense of the deck that is going to move forward, it's going to be a blue-black mid-range deck. It is the mirror match. Do you have any insights? You know, they're going to end up going against a very unusual, very unconventional of this Esper control deck. Kind of that blue-black, it's got the Eldest Reborn as this really cool inclusion in the deck. How do you feel like these blue-black mid-range decks can fare against what appears to be sort of this base control deck, similar in its color pairing, but with somewhat of a different strategy at the end of the day?
Oh, so it looks like we have a ruling here, and so I'd like to...
Sure, we'll focus on what we have actually happening down at the battlefield, because this ruling is going to have a massive impact on the fabric of this game, and the fabric of this match, and the fabric of the U.S. national team. There's a lot happening here in this moment, and it's going to be curious to see what actually happens here. So I'm very interested to see, but at the end of the day, it is going to be one of these players moving forward.
everybody waiting quietly, trying to read the lips of this judge.
I know. I can imagine just how many people in chat are suddenly deciding that it's time to really exercise that skill that they developed at one point of learning how to read lips. And it looks like these players, I do see mana.
So was he at 2? Did he?
It looks like I do see mana untapping on that side of the battlefield. The life totals, I'm being told, are staying as is, and the Bloodfast will not be activated. So this is what I am receiving from from what it is. You know, I'm not a judge myself, and I'm going to let these judges make their ruling. And it looks like Dylan Brown is going to be untapping. He's going to be transforming this Temple of Aclazotz, and he is going to be heading into this one. So there is a Torrential Gearhulk on the battlefield for Matthew Nicolai, who is at 9. Dylan Brown bringing back Champion of Wits. We're going to go ahead and grab that token. That's exiled, and we're going to see Dylan Brown. Enough cards in hand, no such thing. Let's draw 4. Let's discard 2. Let's keep it going. 3 mana left remaining. That Temple of Aclazotz also able to gain Dylan Brown 4 life at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I'm surprised Dylan, again, is going for this champion here. You know, he has the multiple copies of Wrath's Contempt in hand. He can deal with this Torrential Gearhulk now that Matthew Nicolai is tapped out. Just at 2 life. But again, I think there's a lot of stress that just unfolded. Yeah. You know, I think it's going to be hard to you know, play to the best of your ability after what just transpired. Yeah,
you said it before, where after any time that you get into this tense situation, not only the stress that can come about just in a match with this kind of high-pressure situation, but also a judge call of that high-pressure caliber, it's going to be really important for both of these players to keep a very level head, to, you know, refocus, to really collect themselves and re-enter the situation of this game as it is and keep on pushing forward.
Yeah, and I mean, it's odd because it kind of creates like an anticlimactic feel in some ways, right? Because I'm just being honest. I'm sorry, but
back to business.
Matthew's going to have a lot of trouble fighting his way back into this game at this point, I think.
He's got
so this helps. I didn't realize there's a champion in his graveyard, so he's going to be able to draw 4 cards, then discard 2.
Yes.
And you know, he could find some card draw spells. He could fight his way back in here.
Yeah, and we saw Dylan Brown, of course, he's now given up on, he's got a Temple of Aclazotz, so his card advantage engine is now eliminated. So really the players are playing with what they've got. They've got Champion of Wits. There are multiple Vraska's Contempt for Dylan Brown, which is going to be very much an issue, but suddenly we see the life totals going up a bit. A duress here for Matthew Nicolai. He's going to get the opportunity to really get a sense of what he's up against.
Yeah, duress, just an excellent sideboard card in matchups like this.
Vraska's Contempt, Champion of Wits, land, and a Glint Sleeve Siphoner. The options off of this duress, really, I think he's going to take a Vraska's Contempt. How about you?
I think it's largely dependent on the last card in his hand, right, or the last 2 cards in his hand. It's odd because with the pair of Vraska's Contempts there, you can't put your opponent in a position where they cannot answer a card like Torrential Gearhulk and or the Scarab God. You really need to, you know, take the card that you have the least ability to interact with at this stage of the game.
And at least at this stage of the game, that duress unable to interact with the Glint Sleeve Siphoners or the Champion of Wits. So definitely a bit of a narrowed field as far as what his vision can actually set its sights on. But this is going to have a big effect also on just how Matthew Nicolai views this hand. You know, he was able to draw 4 pitch.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, obviously he has to take the Vraska's Contempt. It's the only non-land creature.
In my mind, you were helping him decide which Vraska's Contempt.
And my brain was still in the judge call. I apologize. You're right.
So Matthew Nicolai, he now has that information. He's got those cards in hand, and he needs to figure out how he can convert those into a win. 9-4. After this tense moment, massive amount of mana on both sides, massive amount of cards, really, on both sides. They've both given up on this Arguel's Bloodfast. They both apparently had enough as far as losing this life, paying this life. And now it's coming down to a fight between these Vraska's Contempt on a Champion of Wits, but Matthew Nicolai holding on to a negate of his own after drawing off of this Champion of Wits, and I'll be very curious to see what the rest of Dylan Brown's hand looks like. I do know about those 2 cards, you know, but once he gets this draw step in, There could be any number of cards, because it's just one Vraska's Contempt. The negate is going to answer that. There's the Champion of Wits, though. There's the draw step. Both of those are going to put new cards into Dylan Brown's hand that Matthew Nicolai does not have information about.
That's absolutely true. I think at this point, Dylan really needs to play a defensive game. He has the cards he needs. These champions are going to put him in a position where he has, way more cards than Matthew in the long term.
And look at this. The last card available for Matthew Nicolai is a Doomfall. And, Liliana Death's Majesty. Now, that is going to be a card that even, we talked about it before.
Wow.
You've got Liliana Death's Majesty, and I think I see the Scarab God in the graveyard. Are you feeling pretty comfortable about that? Or are you willing to go for that when, you know about the Vraska's Contempt on the other side? I have to think that you do.
Oh, absolutely. I think he has Torrential Gearhulk now also. So
the Torrential Gearhulk is going to be a phenomenal addition here. It's going to go for a cast down, take down the opposing Champion of Wits. Now, that one did come into turn, so it's not able to get aggressive yet, but suddenly there is one Vraska's Contempt for Dylan Brown, and it's facing off against a Liliana Death's Majesty, a 4/4 Champion of Wits, and a 5/6 Torrential Gearhulk.
Wow, what a turnaround. Yeah, the Liliana Death's Majesty off that champion. Just the perfect card there from Matthew. Dylan, he tapped down all of his mana that turn. The duress protecting this play from Matthew Nicolai. Matthew Nicolai coming back from a situation where it felt like there was basically no way for him to win. I was under the impression that Dylan, considering what was going on, just had the win.
He started this turn with no permanents on the battlefield whatsoever.
He had one card left in his hand.
And suddenly he's in a decently commanding board state against an opponent at 4 life with 2 lethal threats and a Liliana Death's Majesty, and Dylan needs to find some kind of way to navigate his way through this with a Glintleaf Siphoner, a pair of Champion of Wits, and that lonely Vraska's Contempt after losing the other one to the duress.
Yeah, so it's important to note that by sacrificing the champion, Dylan Brown's life total is now a little bit higher.
Great point.
And the Vraska's Contempt would also pad it even more. So Dylan's not going to die in the near future anyway. But Matthew has put himself in a position where he has a shot this game, as opposed to what it looked like just one turn cycle ago, wherein it seemed like all hope was lost.
We're back at it. And what you're referring to there, using that Temple of Aclazotz to tap and sacrifice that Champion of Wits, which had been eternalized, that means that rather than being killed by the cast down, you sacrifice it, you gain life equal to its toughness. Wow. It's now Champion of Wits against Champion of Wits, though one of them feeling fairly eternalized. A Torrential Gearhulk, a Liliana Death's Majesty. This game has just... I can't imagine how I would feel if I had been in for all 3 of these games.
Yeah.
I'm already feeling like, I'm feeling it. My shoulders are tense just watching these players, empathizing with just the level of pressure that they're under right now. And we've only been in here for several turn cycles, but not even the whole game.
Yeah. I mean, this has clearly been quite the slog.
These players are going to come away from this one and have to face off against Esper Control, too. So, duress coming down for Dylan Brown. It's time for him to have a little bit of information. We see a negate and a doomfall on the other side of the battlefield. One of these will be going away. They're both fine options. One is going to either take a look at the hand or remove a creature. The other one is really going to protect Matthew Nicolai's game plan once he has the opportunity to untap. And that's going to be the doomfall that is going to get discarded by this duress.
Yeah, and the Doomfall, a more versatile card than the Negate. The Negate requires, obviously, Matthew to have mana untapped specifically when Dylan is doing things. And the Negate is also something that Dylan can set up for by blocking something with a Negate of his own, which I think is in his hand.
So it's going to be a pass back to Matthew Nicolai from Dylan Brown. 10-9 here after that. Vraska's Contempt puts Dylan up another 2 life. Huge amount of mana. Really, Dylan holding it up still 4 after spending quite a bit that game. Just the mana game of this one, it almost feels like these cards, their mana cost just feels so much less relevant at this stage of the game. It's more just, what are the cards that you have and how can you make them line up, not can you afford them.
Yeah, well, it's crazy though, right? Because with the Champion of the Wits activations out of the graveyard, both of these players, they have stuff to do with just about all of their mana. Like last turn, we're watching Dylan. Dylan, he eternalizes that Champion of Wits. He spends 7 mana. And he gets 4 options. Now, he does a bunch of other stuff. And then he's still passing the turn with negate mana open. It's kind of crazy.
And we see Matthew Nicolai here just asking a quick question of the judge. More just repetition of the idea of, if you have a question, ask a judge. That's what they're there for. You got to love that. So, that Field of Ruin coming down, and it's pointing at that Temple of Aclazot still, and Brown is going to have to decide, does he want to use this one now? And we are going to end up losing this. I think he was just floating that one for mana rather than activating its other ability. So that is going to be 1 black mana floating for Dylan Brown. Just good housekeeping. You know? If it's going to go away anyway, tap it for a mana. You never know when it's going to come in handy.
Yeah. Hey, Matthew. He may have some sort of pre-combat thing that he wants to use on that Champion of Wits right now, and you can use that mana to interact with it.
So both of these players are going to be grabbing a basic out of their library, that Field of Ruin, 2 mana, tap it, destroy target non-basic creature. Both you and that land's controller get to search your library for a basic land and put it into play. We're going to go ahead and attack in with the Torrential Gearhulk. That's going to put a Champion of Wits into the graveyard. That's going to be relevant because it does have that Eternalize ability. Whoa, Sorcerer's Spyglass coming on down. This is going to be an interesting way to go about this. You take a look at target opponent's hand, and then you get to name a card, and activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities.
Yeah, so he's trying to name Champion of Wits here. He knows that Dylan has, multiple options to eternalize. He kept that negate. Dylan, thinking that his negate would protect his own spell, is instead finding himself in a situation where, his negate is getting negated. And suddenly, Matthew Nicolai has turned off those Champion of the Wits in Dylan Brown's graveyard. It looks like he may have found a way to turn this around. This is insane. This game has been absurd on every single facet of the universe that things can be absurd. If the only thing that can make this game more absurd is if the middle of the table fell out and cat people started coming through it.
So Sorcerer's Spyglass naming Champion of Wits, that is going to stop it. I have a feeling that I know what that judge call was, or what that question to the judge was going to be, verifying that this is going to be a plan to work. Cat people coming up from the center of the table. I mean, credit where it's due. That would definitely make the game stranger. All right.
It would, yeah.
We're going to see 2 of these Glint-Sleeve Siphoners come down to the battlefield. 2 ones, they're going to make a little bit of energy, and these do offer an opportunity for Dylan Brown to gain some life if he can. Or, I'm sorry, to draw some cards if he can, but facing off against an Eternalized Champion of Wits and that 5/6 Torrential Gearhulk does offer some issues.
Yeah, and a double attack here from Matthew Nicolai puts Dylan in a position where he may want to just chump this Torrential Gearhulk and then draw an extra card with the other Glint-Sleeve Siphoner. He may just want to double block and try to get rid of that Eternalized creature. I like the chump here. I think this is definitely the right play from Dylan.
Yep, so Dylan Brown is going to go down to 2. Not an unfamiliar life total for him so far in this game. The life totals have really been dancing around some low numbers. And now we have got this Glint-Sleeve Siphoner at 2. A Glint-Sleeve Siphoner, so that he can pay 1 life to draw an additional card next turn. He will be at a single life. Champion of Wits coming down, and it looks like we might see that Essence Scatter in hand. Come down, try and take it out. Interesting thing here. Sorcerer's Spyglass, does that just say... I don't think that at all defines that it has to be your opponent's.
It does not. So Matthew Nicolai can also not activate Eternalize. He, however, he didn't know he was going to draw a Champion of Wits that turn in his defense.
Field of Ruin going to come down and take down the opposing Temple of Aclazot, and now this game has come down to a Glint-Sleeve Siphoner with an extra draw for Dylan Brown to go down to 1.
Wow, Matthew has played this game beautifully. I'm really impressed that he was able to come back.
Just the return after that judge call, getting back in the zone, making it happen, eternalizing his Champion of Wits, playing down the Liliana, bringing back the Torrential Gearhulk, having the presence of mind to go for that one as opposed to any other card that he had available to him.
Whoa!
It's the Scarab God! What a draw!
Oh my God! Oh. All right. All right, so at 1 life, Dylan Brown finds the Scarab God. He has so much mana that he can get multiple activations this turn. This is going to just flood the board with 4/4s. Now he can start returning these Champion of Wits and drawing 4 cards and discarding 2. And he doesn't even need to use the activated Eternalize ability, which Matthew had turned off via that Sorcerer's Spyglass.
So we're going to bring that one back in, and yes, it is going to be
Wow.
4/4s hitting the battlefield all over the place. Dylan Brown went down to one, drew an extra card, got the Scarab God of everything, and now he is going to be looking to absolutely flood this board with threats. Draw another 4 cards, discard a couple of cards. The back and forth on this one has been nutty. Didn't you tell me that this game couldn't get any stranger?
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. I said I lied. It turns out this game could become more absurd. Dylan Brown, with 2 life, paying the last life he's able to pay without losing the game, drawing an extra card, finds the Scarab God, able to activate that, stabilize this board, and now Matthew's got his work cut out for him. Matthew could draw a Scarab God here himself. That could happen.
He just drew never to return. He can destroy a creature and then exile that Scarab God potentially from the graveyard, and then
that definitely it's an answer to the Scarab God. The problem is if he uses that never to return here. One, Dylan Brown just drew 4 cards and discarded 2 cards. The other thing is that even when he does this, Dylan Brown could even just activate the Scarab God, returning another champion, drawing another 4 cards and discarding 2 cards, at which point Matthew's completely out of resources, and Dylan has just drawn like tons and tons of cards. Of course, I've said this over and over in the match, and then things back and forth. So
I do think we have a negate and also an Essence Scatter in hand for Dylan Brown, so he's going to disable that one. Taking a quick look through his graveyard, is there anything that I'm worried that Matthew Nicolai will exile? And now we are going to get to untap. We are going to have access to this Champion of Wits. This is such a dangerous place to be in at this point. I think Matthew Nicolai just trying to make sure that he can get some kind of value out of this return before Dylan Brown untaps and has access to that fantastic amount of mana for the Scarab God.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Matthew Nicolai can, exile enough creatures to really make it relevant, because the thing is there are multiple creatures in graveyards right now, so Dylan Brown's still going to have targets for that Scarab God, even if Matthew Nicolai uses this return, but obviously he's going to do it.
Better now than never.
It's true.
So we're going to get rid of one of those Champion of Wits. Bit of an interesting choice since the Sorcerer's Spyglass is named, but not actually, because the Scarab God is now on the battlefield. What a way to circumvent that Sorcerer's Spyglass.
Yeah. I mean, the Scarab God is definitely a nice way to circumvent a Sorcerer's Spyglass naming Champion of Wits.
I thought we were just about done with the 4/4s that draw 4, discard 2, but instead, Dylan Brown is just going to start activating the Scarab God. This is going to be at the upkeep, and go ahead and give me the quick little short version of why you would actually do this at your upkeep as opposed to at any other point.
So at the beginning of your upkeep, the Scarab God trigger goes on the stack. It doesn't check how many zombies you have until its resolution. So you get to drain them for the amount of zombies that you have in play, and you get to scry that, or not drain them, but they lose life, and you scry equal to the amount of zombies that you have in play. So if you create zombies with that trigger on the stack, then upon resolution, it resolves and sees all those zombies you made.
And you get those additional scries.
That's true.
Yeah, a little bit more card selection with Dylan Brown at 1 life. He's not got a whole lot of wiggle room as far as letting the opponent get any sort of aggression in against him. So, looks like we're going to see more activations of the Scarab God. Let's keep on digging through. We've got 2 copies of Champion Wits. That one draws him 4 cards. He gets to discard 2 cards, and now he gets to take a look through the rest of these graveyards. Is there anything else that I want? Sure. Let's go ahead and bring back this Glintstave Siphoner. That's going to be a 4/4, and now this is going to be 3 zombie cards. Matthew Nicolai going to end up falling down to 6, and that's before we even exit the upkeep. Also, just a Scry 3, Vraska's Contempt, and I think I saw a Search for His content among that as well, maybe in Arguel's Bloodfast, though I don't think Dylan's going to be quite in the market for that one. But his next upkeep, he'd be able to start gaining some of it back.
You know, Dylan leaving open both Essence Scatter and Vraska's Contempt here, putting himself in a situation where he is just solidly in control of this game.
Can the top card of Matthew Nicolai's deck dig him back into this after everything?
Oh my goodness, he drew Upheaval.
So it's just going to be an attack all out. To me, this looks like kind of an attack of desperation. We see the 5/6, the 4/4, and the 2/2 all getting their damage in. Matthew Nicolai maybe just trying whatever it is that he can at the end here.
Yeah, Matthew Nicolai, a desperation attack here. Dylan Brown's at 1.
There's the handshake from Matthew Nicolai. Dylan Brown, the 5th seed, the blue-black mid-range player. He is going to be representing the U.S. What a commanding game. What a back and forth. I cannot imagine the rest of these games, or if we just happen to tune in for possibly the most exciting portion of that entire match right at the end, and that is going to be such a big win. Now, we know the two players who are going to be trying to call themselves the U.S. National Champion.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of brain capital that both these players just needed to output. This is going to be one heck of a finals. Right? Dylan Brown, able to win one of the most intense back-and-forth blue-black mid-range matches that I've ever seen. One of the most intense back-and-forth matches I've ever seen in an elimination round at a tournament.
Yeah, and of course we've got Justin Andrus as well on his Esper deck that is going to be trying to contend with him. These two players, they are now going to be fighting against their future teammate. That's the situation that they've now found themselves in, but they're trying to put themselves in the place of calling themselves the champion. But of course, we're going to have to find out who that is after these messages.